Hi there, and a warm welcome to the Transcend and Succeed show. I'm Dawn Livingston, and today I have an amazing guest who's going to talk to us about anxiety and how to get immediate relief. So stay with us. I'll introduce him right after this. And today I am delighted to introduce to you Adam Riley. Adam is a world traveller and entrepreneur originally from New Zealand and is the founder of Heal Your Anxiety and the creator of the Anxiety Relief Protocol, a revolutionary new process that gives you immediate relief from anxiety wherever you are and no matter what your anxiety is about. So welcome to the show, Adam.
All right. Thank you, Dawn. Great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Can you tell us your story relating to anxiety and what happened to make you look for a way to tackle the anxiety that you were experiencing?
Yeah, sure. So, uh, anxiety is something that I experienced as far as I can remember throughout my whole life, although I didn't used to call it anxiety. That was a word that I kind of learned in recent years. I just knew that I felt horrible and this wave of kind of negativity would come over me. I had a lot of social anxiety, so in social situations in school and really throughout my life, difficulty connecting with others, connecting in groups. Uh, I always had this horrible feeling, and I also always had this desire to be free from it, even though I didn't understand it, I didn't know what it was. But yeah, as well as always having this feeling, I feel like I've been dedicated my whole life to finding a way to get free from it, just to feel normal, basically. And yeah, I can stop there, or should I continue more with kind of my journey of
Yes,
uh,
please. Share it with us.
okay. So I can, like, well, as a teenager and young adult, I would uh, drink, and that kind of helped a little bit, but it's not an ideal solution for other reasons. uh, I remember, like, about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was very deep in, I went, really also to try and heal this. I went very deep into spiritual things. I was doing a lot of yoga and a lot of meditation, and I got a lot of benefit from that. But I remember sitting there like a few years ago, and I'd done an hour of meditation a day for a year. And I remember sitting there at the end and feeling like I still don't have, I'm still not able to strongly affect this feeling that comes over me. I'm still not able to do something that will kind of immediately help. I can, these things that were helping, but yeah, I wasn't really getting it under control at all. And I felt in some ways that, I was just as at the mercy of it as I ever was. And I think, like, if anybody has had anxiety, really the thing is, for me, was this feeling like there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. Like, this is something that can't be fixed, and I'll always be like this. And that was kind of the most horrible part about it, just feeling like it's hopeless. There's no hope. There's nothing you can do. And I think, like, that was one of the main insights and the most important things that I learned, and that I 100% believe now, is that it's not something that you have to be stuck with forever. It's not that you're broken. It's not that there's something fundamentally wrong with you and you'll always be like that. This is something that is happening, was happening to me. And for those that have anxiety, it's something that is happening to them. And it's possible to be free from it, I believe. And even if not free, it's possible to have less and less, to heal it over time and have less and less, so that it really you get your life back. Yes.
Yeah, I've been in that situation myself, where you don't know what you can do. You don't think there's anything you can do. And, we've unwittingly handed our power over to someone else, or other people. I did quite a lot of that growing up as well, just realizing that I didn't know what I was doing, but everybody else did. So I totally understand what you're saying. If you're in a position where you don't feel in control, it's not a nice feeling to be living with at all.
Exactly, exactly. Control is a really interesting word around anxiety, because, like, a strong anxiety, an attack, or even just a strong experience of anxiety is very much a feeling of loss of control. And the first thing, and that's makes it more scary, which makes the anxiety worse, because you feel like you're losing control. You don't know how to regain control, and that can kind of spiral and really, make the anxiety just get out of control even more. Yeah.
Yeah. And how else would you define anxiety, other over and above, feeling out of control?
So for me, I mean, anxiety is a feeling. It's an emotion. Uh, it often comes with a lot of thoughts. Just the basic experience of it is thoughts and emotions, strong thoughts and emotions. Uh, I have many definitions for anxiety, because there's many ways to look at it. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, the basic experience of it is feelings, feelings and thoughts, often out of control thoughts, overwhelming feelings, often fear. Uh, I actually define, like, I have a couple of definitions for anxiety. One of them, the narrow one, is a fear response that is out of proportion to the situation, meaning there's a normal amount of fear in any given situation, right? Like, if you are going to cross the road, it's normal to have a little bit of fear, because that's going to stop you from running out in front of a car. If we didn't have some fear, we would do a lot of really dumb things, right? So it kind of keeps us in line and helps us pay attention to what's important. Even, like, coming on a show like this and being a little bit nervous is uh good, because it would make me pay attention and come and at my best. So a little bit of fear is useful. All of our emotions have a calibrated useful amount in our lives, and we don't want to not have fear or any other emotion. But when it's really out of proportion to the situation, when you feel paralyzed and you're not able to express yourself, you're not able to do anything, it feels out of control. So this is when I say it is anxiety. And this can be at different levels. It doesn't have to be a panic attack. It could just be a bit more than that's needed, and it may stop you from doing something that you wanted to do, or yeah, may just be holding you back in different ways in your life, in subtle ways as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like overwhelming thoughts that you don't realize you're allowing to get out of control. Would you sum that up as being something that when you're talking about, thoughts, sometimes when we overthink things and we overanalyze things, then they start to become overwhelming, and that's when the fear really kicks in and the anxiety really kicks in.
Yeah. So what I'm saying with that is, if you have a situation where it might be normal to have some fear, but the response that you're getting is way more than
Mhm.
is needed for the situation,
Yeah.
then that is anxiety right there. And I say that for fear, but I that's the narrow definition, but I could open it up and say any uncomfortable emotion, right? Because when you talk to people who have anxiety, they will also talk about grief, sadness, frustration, anger, loneliness, confusion, like all of these things are kind of all swimming around together, kind of as you were saying, like all these thought patterns, emotions, that you often are not getting just one of them at a time, you're getting several of them at a time. And it's not as simple necessarily as like a fear response. It can be all kinds of things connected together that are, again, out of proportion to the situation. There's a I believe there's a calibrated amount of maybe frustration or anger or confusion or sadness, but when it's really out of control and it's starting to like negatively affect your life, then I would put it under the umbrella of anxiety as well. Or at least I would say that the same tools that I help people with help across the board with these strong emotions.
Okay. Okay. So, in your experience, then, how is the anxiety created? Where does it stem from mostly in your experience?
Okay, so I think I have a unique perspective on this, in that, in my view, uh, all anxiety is originally from trauma, meaning that, um, and I don't mean just like specific traumatic events. If somebody had a really horrible thing happen to them, that's a certain kind of trauma. Uh, but actually, we all have trauma from our childhood. Basically, any time that our needs weren't met, which happened a lot, our parents, as good as they may or may not have been, no parent can be there for their child all the time and meet their needs all the time. And children, or us as children, we kind of make up stories and strategies around this lack of getting our needs met, and we create trauma. We What is trauma? We store patterns of thoughts and emotions, strategies, beliefs. We store this for another time. It's stored in our system somehow, and then it's triggered, right? So we know this idea of something triggering us. So whenever we're triggered, it means there's some kind of stimulus that is activating that stored stuff. So it's triggered, meaning something happens, and it could be just a thought in your head that triggers other things to come up, or it could be a situation in the outside world that is triggering, and that activates this stored stuff, and it floods the system, and you're all of a sudden experiencing the stuff that was stored before. So this is my view of where it comes from. I believe that it's a new kind of way of looking at it, but I really believe that to be true, and I believe it to be fundamentally different from stress, which we can talk about later.
Sure. I mean, and I agree with that. I have to say I agree with that. I don't know how familiar you are with the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he says, the same thing, that, the mind takes a snapshot of something that is uncomfortable, and then that gets stored in the brain, and the brain generates this chemical into the body, which will create that anxiety or that emotion around it. and then every time the person recalls this memory, then the brain sends out more chemicals to reinforce that anxiety or that emotion that the person's been feeling. So I totally understand where you're coming from. So
That's great.
let's talk about some things, lifestyle changes or lifestyle can have on anxiety. So like diet and exercise, can these sort of things be used to manage the anxiety or to help it at all?
Yeah, I believe, firstly, it's not necessarily my area of expertise, like lifestyle things, but in general, I 100% believe that uh, it makes a big difference to take care of yourself. So, I mean, the basics, food, eating well, drinking lots of water, getting sunlight, getting exercise, and even breathing well, just the very
Yeah.
basic things that the body needs. Uh, and I really believe that anxiety, this is another view of it, is based around needs. So these are the physical needs that you can meet, and this does a couple of things. One, it reinforces and strengthens your system because those are the things that your body needs to survive and thrive. But it also sends a message to your system that you love it and that you care about it, right? And that on its own is a very powerful message too, uh, that can be healing on its own.
Yes, it can. Definitely things, the oxygen and the exercise as well. I know how that can reduce your cortisol levels as well, which when we are in a heightened state of anxiety, these levels can be through the roof. So I definitely know that these few things can, um, help make you feel better and give the body what it needs to help you to calm down.
Hmm.
Listen,
Yes.
can we talk a little bit about warning signs? So do you see warning signs that, anxiety may be reaching a point where, additional investigation may be necessary? And if so, what would be um, your advice to take? What would be the next steps to take?
Yeah, well, this comes back to the idea of like what is anxiety, because we call it anxiety when it's out of control and it's really heavily negatively affecting somebody's life, right? We say, okay, this person has anxiety, but we all have some level of anxiety. We all have things that trigger us, and we all have situations that where fear comes up that it stops us from doing what we want to do. Most of us, at least, have that. So we're all on the spectrum somewhere of anxiety. Um, that said, like anytime, I think the more awareness that we can have inside of how we're doing all the time, like the more we can be aware of like, how am I doing right now? Like, do I feel clear? Do I feel, do I have access to my rational mind right now? Like, asking these kind of questions, because sometimes, um, this kind of these anxiety thoughts, which is kind of like augmented reality, like they may be based on something true, but they're like blowing it way out of proportion. So, we often believe these things, and the earlier that we can catch it, it's easier to do something about. Um, Firstly, and also with the protocol that I'll talk about, if you train yourself to use this when you have less anxiety, that will mean you're much more likely to remember to do it and to be able to do it, and that it will work when you have high levels of anxiety. So the lower levels of anxiety are also a great place to um, learn how to work with your anxiety so that if something happens that spikes it high, you actually are more prepared for it, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Thank you. Now is probably a good time if we could take just a quick break. But stick around because Adam is going to tell us his favourite quote that is relevant to the work that he's doing. So we will be right back.
Holy Hydrogen introduces the most powerful health enhancement device in the world, the Lord's Hydrofix Premium Edition. Studies have shown therapeutic potential for cancer, diabetes, digestive and heart issues, and essentially every organ and system in the body. Visit holyhydrogen.com to see the latest technology that elevates your immune system and fights inflammation. This isn't medical advice, but if you have any health concerns, I strongly recommend that you learn more about hydrogen. Visit holyhydrogen.com to learn more about this groundbreaking gold standard hydrogen generator that for a reasonable price creates therapeutic quality hydrogen gas for inhalation and hydrogen infused water for consumption. Remember, holyhydrogen.com.
Hi, Laura Cross, your host for Mindful Mondays, every Monday at 1 p.m. Central Time, where you can embark on a transformative journey of self-care and ultimate happiness. Tune in to the Voyage to Vitality channel on the Achieve TV network. Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. Be there, be mindful, and join us on E360 TV.
And welcome back. So, Adam, do tell us about your favourite quote and how it's relevant to your work.
Okay, great. So a favorite quote of mine is actually from Daniel Packard, who was the teacher that I really learned the most from about anxiety. And he said something, and no one else quotes this. I took this directly from a meeting with him on a call. And he said once, it takes courage to feel. It takes courage to feel. And it really like stood out in my mind because it really does, you know. It takes courage to feel, and I totally understand, like, you know, why we don't want to feel anxiety. We don't want to feel the emotions. We don't want to feel these things. And so it's natural to kind of want to get away from it, right? Which is totally fine. However, it just doesn't like help in the long term. You kind of get a payoff from it in the short term, but you're you're kind of turning away from yourself, which sends the wrong message to yourself, firstly. And secondly, you can't heal your anxiety by turning away from it. So I really admire anybody who decides to turn inwards and allow themselves to feel what they're feeling, and it really is the first step to recovery, to healing. And it's not easy, but it takes courage, but it's the most important step, maybe. Yeah.
Agreed. And I think just the small act of actually acknowledging the feelings and how you're truly feeling can be, a good catapult into healing some other things moving forward. I think it's getting out that uncomfortable feeling that we all have and shrinking backwards with it rather than meeting it head on. And taking steps to actually, push through that uncomfortable feeling. So yeah, that's a really good quote. A really good quote. Thank you, Adam. Um, let's get back. I wanted to ask you about, do you see relationships between anxiety and other conditions, other mental health conditions?
I think everything is connected. I mean, I'm not an expert in any other kind of health conditions, but I can just say that um, any other health issues will tend to cause anxiety because it's very worrying to have anxiety. I mean, it's very worrying to have any kind of health issue, right? We want to feel good. We want to be able to connect with the people we care about. We want to do the things we want to do. We have our goals. And as soon as you have any kind of a condition, it kind of throws a spanner in the works, which is normal to cause a lot of anxiety. So that's one thing I can say. Another one that I'll just mention is depression. Uh, I think there is more to say on this, but one way of looking at depression, which is unique, is that depression, if you take the word itself, means a low pressure, right? We use that in weather. It means a low pressure, meaning that, there's a low. There's just a low. And at least one of the ways we can get into depression, and it may be one of the main ways, is through excessive anxiety. Meaning what happens is anxiety is very energy costly, right? It uses a lot of energy. And if you have anxiety for an extended period of time, your system, and you're not able to get it under control, you're not able to get out of it, your system will actually just say, okay, like we can't continue this energy expenditure on this experience that's happening. So we'll just start shutting down, right? And this is where you just feel tired, lethargic, and this is, and you're really down in it. You still have maybe these horrible thoughts, and you just also have no energy. And this is a way of understanding depression, like as a extension of anxiety, basically.
Yeah, and those are very, I see them as low vibrational, so low density. So that in itself is very tiring. Yeah, so I totally see that. And what about technology? What about technology? Because we're constantly connected to the internet with our devices. Do you find that they play a role in anxiety?
Yeah. Well, if you think about like social media, I think that plays a lot on anxiety in a sense where, or even the use of the phone in a sense of it can often be a way of running away from ourselves, because what a lot of people have, even if they don't have a high spikes of anxiety, they'll have a kind of low level anxiety, which just is when they just don't feel great when nothing is happening. It's like, there's nothing happening. It doesn't feel that good just to be here in myself. So I want to get out, and a natural thing to do is to, to go outwards to whatever it is, and the phone or technology is a great excuse to do that, or it's just readily available, and it gives immediate, dopamine hits and entertainment. So it very powerfully gives us that out, which there's nothing wrong with going out. There's nothing wrong with avoiding. It just doesn't help heal your anxiety, and it's not great for your nervous systems. It's good for your nervous system if what's going on inside of you is really too much and you need a break. Then it's okay to go out. But if you can, it's better to be in. So that's one thing, is that it's a way that people distract themselves rather than kind of turning inwards and having that courage to be there with themselves, even if it's a low level of discomfort that they're feeling, because that's a kind of anxiety, it's a low level anxiety. You have social media, people getting addicted to the validation, and this is kind of based on a form of social anxiety. It's based on social anxiety, kind of needing validation, needing other people's positive attention on you for you to feel okay. That's based on a kind of anxiety, which is neediness. It's not to say there's anything wrong with any of these things. I would say wanting other people to like you is great. Needing it is detrimental because it compromises you, basically, and you don't feel good if you don't get it. If you just want it and you don't get it, you don't care. And then the thing of needing to be online all the time or needing to be available is very energy draining, and it kind of messes with our attention. It makes it more difficult for us to focus. It's very beneficial if we can just focus on one thing for a while. So I feel like, the distraction, I'm not against technology at all. I love technology when it works. And
Yes.
when it works, I love technology. And I'm not against it. The world is evolving. It's not going to go back. Technology is just going to keep evolving. So I believe that we need to evolve with it, but we need to learn how to really take care of ourselves within that.
Yes.
And make ourselves priorities over whatever it is that we want to achieve in the outside world through our connection with technology.
Agreed. Totally agreed. And I'm the first person to put my hand up and say guilty as charged for mindlessly scrolling, because there's something I know that I need to do and I can't be bothered doing it. So if I'm scrolling, then I don't have to do it. And then later on, I can just say to myself, oh, I didn't have any time, so you can do it tomorrow. Instead of just doing it and getting it done, guilty, absolutely guilty. And in the same lines as social media, where you were talking about social media, I think the same would be for watching the news, the daily news.
Yes. So it's interesting. I'll be honest, I don't watch the news. So it's not something that I do personally. But it definitely gives a augmented idea, just disproportionate idea of how things are in the world, right? I think it's good to be up to date with current affairs and know what's going on. But I can see people getting into things where they're worrying about all of these things that are on the other side of the world, etc. So I think, being able to kind of find a balance with that, where you care about it, but you're also, your immediate surroundings are your immediate reality. And I think being in a constant state of anxiety about things that are not happening directly to you is not beneficial, for sure. And yeah, I mean, it's maybe a little bit of a tangent, but like the understanding of the importance of this really dropped in for me during the pandemic, when I realized how, aside from the kind of the virus side of the pandemic, there was a anxiety pandemic, where people were just freaked out and were not able, that and understandably, like, everybody's lives changed so quickly, and then there was no security of what was going to happen in the future. And the possibility of getting this virus and something, all these horrible possibilities. So it's natural that people were freaking out, but there is definitely an ability. Humans have an ability to deal with difficult situations, and I feel like people were not emotionally prepared for that. And I kind of feel like another thing is, working on your anxiety and healing your anxiety in your day-to-day life, which, hopefully there's not any crazy, horrible things happening. It kind of prepares you and gives you resilience for in case something, of a bigger magnitude happened to the world or to your community or to your family, or whatever. So yeah, because if you already have a high level of anxiety or medium level of anxiety, and then something happens, you're already not in a great place to deal with difficult situations. Whereas if you do the work to on your anxiety and get it under control and start to learn how to work with emotions and process anxiety, then when that bigger thing comes, firstly, you're not at that high level, you're at a lower level to start with, and you have the tools to deal with the emotions when that, how do I say, like, God forbid, something happens. We never hope, but it's wise to be prepared. We can all, we know now that, something can happen.
Yeah. And I would think the news, the news, watching the news, may be considered a trigger as well if it's something that really gets you upset. I know before we moved here, the news was on quite a lot, and I used to be quite, I don't know, just agitated all the time. So when we moved here, we decided not to have the cable TV so that the news could be watched all the time. And do you know how much more peaceful we are because we're not immersing ourselves in it all day or most of the day? And I would probably add to that not looking or not watching the news or not looking at your social media channels first thing in the morning or before you go to bed at night. Um, do you have an opinion on that? Because I think it's really quite important for people to understand that, when you're first awake and just before you go to sleep, your subconscious mind is wide open, and that's when all the information gets taken in.
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, with what you said about the news in your house, I'm glad that you, make that change, and I can totally see what a difference that would make. I think anybody who's watching, that amount of news, it's definitely, good to find a balance where you maybe just say, if you really want to watch the news, then you'd watch at these certain times, but like, set limits. And that's really it with all the technology, with the social media, et cetera, as well. It's setting some boundaries for yourself that prioritize your self-care over, your desire to scroll or the enjoyment that you get from scrolling. There's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, I personally, don't connect on my phone for about the first hour in the morning, and also try to turn it off the last hour at night. Every so often that doesn't happen, but as a rule, I try and do that, because personally in the morning, I wake up kind of with, as you say, quite open, and there's usually some things to process, and it's good. It's really great to take some time in the morning and just allow yourself to connect with the day, process anything from the night, and before starting to jump into these things, definitely. And then at night, let your mind unwind, let it reflect on the day, and without that distraction. And if anybody's struggling with sleep, that's 100% important to turn your phone off at least an hour before going to bed.
Yep, totally agreed. Can we touch a little bit about communication with family and friends? For if you're going through some anxiety, it can be hard to tell your family and your friends actually that you're struggling. And I think there's a perception there that you could be seen as being weak and not being able to handle things. So, what advice would you give anyone that is in that position?
The first thing that comes to mind is to find community of other people who are struggling with the same things. Because firstly, when you connect with other people who have the same thing and they're going through similar experiences, even if it's a bit different, you start to realize for yourself, that this is something normal, like it's something that happens and normal. So even if your family might not understand it, you have a group of people who do. And I think that would support you to have more self-assurance to bring it up with a family member, because it's not just you having this crazy thing. You're like, that you have this community and it's normal, and you can explain, and you get the tools to be able to explain it better, because there's definitely it's hard for me to say in general, because it really depends on the specific people that you'd be talking to as to be the way that you would introduce it. But I feel like, getting support in connecting with people who do have it, and then from there, that's going to help you to have the tools to connect with people close to you.
And I think, being able to just talk to somebody who's neutral, who doesn't really know you at all. I think it's sometimes easier to talk to somebody that you don't know rather than approach people that you do know, because that person will have an open mind and be able to give you some really good advice. That was what I found in my journey, really my discovery, that speaking to a counsellor for about 30 minutes actually set me on this path that I'm on now, and gave me so much in the way of realization that my life was nowhere near as bad as I was perceiving it to be. I was just able to take back the reins. That was how I got through all the suffering that I had when I was younger. So I think opening up and speaking to somebody that you don't know, even just for a half hour, can be, very, very beneficial. I totally agree with that. Will you tell us about your anxiety protocol?
Sure, absolutely. So I've developed this 3-step protocol. It came to me through I was working with Daniel Packard, who I mentioned earlier. He was focused on anxiety. He had these tools that were incredible. I started to apply them to myself. I found these certain specific steps that were just very, very deep, and they work very, very quickly. And I can say that, I discovered this like a little over 2 years ago, and this has created the biggest shift for me in my anxiety. So I have other things that I do, but this core process is the core of what I do. And my life is completely changed, like from doing this. And it works on the premise of helping, like taking care of yourself when you have anxiety the way that you would with somebody else who is in strong emotional pain, who's in anxiety, who's in distress, because we know how to help somebody else, right? If somebody that we love and care about, a friend, a family member, a child, a loved one, comes to us in distress, we would naturally turn towards them. We would naturally be there for them, listen to them, and be compassionate and accepting towards them. And that would be exactly what they needed, right? That alone would help them calm down. The problem is we don't know how to do this to ourselves when we have emotional pain, but I guess the important point is that we can first. We 100% can give the same care that we would to somebody else to ourselves. The question is how, and that is the complicated part in a sense, because anxiety is a very strong stimulus. We're feeling out of control. The fear response is activated. The amygdala is activated. The frontal cortex is locked down. We don't have access to our rational mind. And so it's difficult for us to do anything constructive, right? When we have anxiety, which is why this protocol is so powerful, because it just teaches you to bring your attention it just gives you the guidance to do that. It gives you the guidance of how, even when things are out of control, even when you're feeling strong anxiety, how you can kind of drop into this relationship within yourself of your awareness, your ability to experience thoughts and emotions, and the thoughts and emotions. So this is a kind of relationship, and you're able. These 3 steps give you the ability to give yourself this care and love you would for somebody else, and when you do that, it is incredible. It is incredible, very, very powerful. For me, it's called the anxiety relief protocol because it really does give immediate relief from anxiety. So it's just, you can, if I measure anxiety from 1 to 10, 10 being a panic attack, 1 being low. And if you're at a 7 or an 8, it can at least get you down, say, to a 5 or a 4, sometimes a 2 or lower. It differs for everybody in each different situation, but it will give you relief in the moment. But it's also like the most powerful tool, or one of the most powerful tools for healing your anxiety over time. So when you keep doing it consistently over time, it is basically actually healing inside where the anxiety is coming from. So this trauma that's in there, that's being released or being activated, there's a finite amount of that. And when you continue to do this over time, it actually, it starts to heal where the anxiety is coming from, so that you just actually have less in the first place, right? So the first thing of relieving the anxiety is just bringing it down. That's the first thing you want, and that's really what the first thing the anxiety relief protocol is designed for, is just to get you out of trouble, right? And that is huge on its own. You just talking about the anxiety being like an out of control feeling, this gets you back in control, and that's huge. And then, if you continue with it, it's very healing over time as well.
Sure. I know it sounds great, and really what a lot of people may be interested in right now. There's a lot of things going on in the world that are causing anxiety. So how does your protocol differ from what's already out there?
So the main two things that people ask me about is it a breathing exercise or is it CBT? Breathing exercises are, one of the best things that are out there for anxiety. You know, just taking a deep breath helps to move the energy, and it helps to calm the feeling of anxiety. So I am a believer in breathing exercises or deep breathing for anxiety, but this works differently. I would say that a breathing exercise is more of a symptom relief. It kind of helps with the feeling, that the symptom of the feeling of anxiety, whereas this goes more to the cause. This goes to where the anxiety is coming from, which when you have anxiety, if you think of your nervous system as a person, right? This idea comes from the inner child teaching, which is the way Daniel taught it. If you imagine your nervous system as a person, what does this person need when it feels out of control emotions? It needs you to be there for it. It needs you to listen to it deeply and care for it. It doesn't necessarily need a breathing exercise. The breathing exercise helps, and I recommend people to do breathing exercise, but it's not the reason why that you don't have anxiety because you weren't doing a breathing exercise, if that makes sense. So this really goes deeper to the cause of why the anxiety, and specifically when you have anxiety, this is meeting these deep needs that are in there. And so it works very differently in CBT. My understanding of CBT is something that I would do later, not when you're feeling strong anxiety. And it goes into finding out what the anxiety is about and the beliefs and all these kinds of things, which is beneficial. It's beneficial when you don't have anxiety, right? When you have strong anxiety, when you have all this feelings of anxiety and you're out of control, trying to figure out why it's there, what the beliefs are, like trying to figure out is, in my opinion, one of the biggest mistakes that people make, because it makes the anxiety worse. You're trying to solve a problem when you're in no state for problem solving. The first thing you need to do when you have anxiety is just take care of the fact that you have anxiety. You just take care of yourself. So this is how it differs from CBT. It's not trying to figure anything out. It's not trying to solve any problems. It's really, it's really giving you just exactly what you need in the moment when you have anxiety to get it under control, to take care of yourself and get it under control, so that you can, if you want, start to figure out why it's there, etc.
Sure. So accept it. And I would probably describe what you were speaking about a few moments ago, that is self-nurturing, actually giving yourself what it needs and putting yourself first. Yeah, so I totally agree. Jess, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Are you able to share maybe a couple of success stories with us from people that you've helped with your protocol?
Yeah, sure. I love to share the success stories from the very beginning when I was setting this up, because it just blew me away. I'd come to this on my own, and I was like, wow, this is really incredible for me. And so I wanted to test it with other people. And the first call that I had with a client was a girl who had agoraphobia, and which means she was afraid to be in public spaces. She was specifically very afraid to be on public transport, and to go to the supermarket was one of them. And she was actually the one that I taught her this protocol, that I taught before it was even a protocol, and I hadn't, before any name for it or anything. I was just like trying to explain to her what I was doing, and I came to these 3 steps. And the next call, she told me that she'd gone to the supermarket and she was in the aisle and she felt her anxiety, go up to an 8 out of 10. And she was able to just stop and do this protocol and immediately get herself down, to like a 5 or a 4, just enough to be like, it wasn't out of control. She could manage it and she could manage that situation. So that was just like
enough to take the edge off it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we are way out of time, so I'll have to end that there. But Adam, thank you. That's been a great conversation. You've given us some fantastic information. I've put the information up on the screen here where people can find you, and if they want to sign up for your anxiety relief protocol. But thank you so much for joining me today, and I want to say thank you to all the viewers as well, and whether you're watching live or whether you're on one of the replays. But until next week, I want to say take care. Thank you, Adam.